WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Today on the program, we will chat with the director of Bad River, a new documentary following an indigenous tribe fighting against Enbridge's Line 5.
But first, on the Metro, it looks like the stage is set, Tia, for a rematch between President Biden and former President Donald Trump in this fall's election. With recent polls showing Biden trailing Trump by 5 points, battleground states like Michigan will be crucial. That's why political commentators paid special attention to Michigan's Democratic presidential primary in February, where over 100,000 voters voted uncommitted. But while many have associated the vote with the Listen to Michigan campaign that urged voters to vote uncommitted to push President Biden to support a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war, it's not the only reason. For example, we have a recent op-ed from Warren County executive and longtime Democrat Warren Evans, who revealed he also voted uncommitted in the primary as a way to voice his displeasure with the Michigan Democratic Party and what he says they don't sufficiently do to productively engage with Black people on a consistent basis. So to learn more about his perspective, including what he believes the party should do to engage with more Black voters, we're joined now by Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. Executive Evans, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you too. I had a chance to read the op-ed. I think I have a pretty solid idea, but let me not voice it in my words. Let me have you express what your concerns are.
Yeah, concerns basically is when you look at these elections and you look at the Democratic Party, one of the biggest issues is always just before the election, let's get the turnout. There's too much voter apathy, and particularly in the African-American community, that's a real concern. What I'm trying to do far enough ahead of the election is trying to get the Democratic Party to engage more those people in the community to be able to get that vote out, and specifically elected officials. I mean, that's kind of what democracy is about. You know, when you have a Black county executive, and when you have a number of African-American mayors throughout the state, and all of them say they are not engaged with the Michigan Democratic Party and that the party needs to engage more with us. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit then, right? You're talking about yourself. You're a county executive, but you're saying you're hearing this from mayors, Black mayors who are also elected officials throughout Michigan, that they feel that the Michigan Democratic Party also doesn't speak with them. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah, exactly. The same concerns that I've expressed in the op-ed are the concerns that they have told me they personally have.
Sure. Well, before we get into what a change might look like there, voting uncommitted in a presidential election, that goes to me to the federal level, right? What President Biden is doing, and you're not committed there, versus the Michigan Democratic Party. That's a state apparatus. So do you have concerns that voting uncommitted sends the wrong message, or concerns when it seems like your issue is more with the Democratic Party, or is it with Joe Biden?
You didn't hear me ask for people to vote uncommitted.
Right. That's true.
I did.
Okay.
Big difference.
Right.
Joe Biden didn't have a contest in the Michigan primary. Mm-hmm. I'm not backing away from Joe Biden as the person that I would be most comfortable with in the White House. What I'm saying is that if we're going to get voters out, if we're going to do more than talk about apathy, then we need to be more inclusive of those people who were elected by those constituencies and have some rapport with them to energize and get them out.
Well, but the stakes are pretty big in the fall, right? And I've heard that the folks that with the stakes being so big, you know, it could signal maybe the wrong message to people seeing, oh, Warren Evans voted uncommitted, therefore maybe I should be uncommitted this fall too. Do you not see that as a concern, or do you think this message targets what it needs to? Go ahead.
No, I mean, what I see that is, you know, the way to try to discredit what I was talking about.
Well, let's get in specifically to what you're talking about then, because you're saying there's some structural issues. What are the issues specifically? How would you change them? What do you think the Michigan Democratic Party needs to do that it's not doing right now?
I think it's very simple. They need to include those African-American elected officials at the table when they're discussing organizational changes, when they're talking about how to prepare for an election, when there's discussion about particular issues that may be pertinent to the state of Michigan. Yeah. We'd like to be included at the table in the beginning, not called 4 weeks before the election and asked to get out the vote.
So let's talk about then the policy implications of that then. Are there any specific policies right now that you believe the Michigan Democratic Party is advocating for that has not been sufficiently advocated for that would change if more of these mayors or yourself were included more in the process?
We're talking about really, I think, two different things. The inclusion, to me, ought to be extremely clear. I mean, how do you reach out for African-American outreach and none of that outreach goes to the people who were elected to represent the people that you're trying to do the outreach with? I mean, it is not necessarily that there's any structural change I'd like to see in policy. Yeah. What I'd like to do is be at the table when the policy is being created, so input can be given. You can't. There's no input that's given when you're not at the table.
Would it be fair for me to state then, from what I'm hearing, it's kind of like the Michigan Democratic Party, in your opinion, says, hey, we need to get voters out. We know who we can go to. We can go to Executive Evans. He knows the people. But then in the other 3 years, other time, when it's talking about other things, you're not included at the table.
Well, I don't know that they feel that even at the election time. What I do know is they'll call and say, let's all get together and try to get the vote out, which would be the ideal way to do it. What I'm saying is part of my displeasure and those mayors that I talk to is the lack of inclusion. And in many respects, the apathy of voters can be directly tied to the enthusiasm or lack of same that those elected people have.
And I understand this. You're saying if you engage with the local leaders from that electorate, they're more likely to get out and vote, which is something the Democrats would be worried about. But then if I were to try to put my hat for Michigan Democratic Party Chair Lavora Barnes on or something, I might say, well, hey, look, due to Michigan Democrats and the trifecta that we were able to pull off in Lansing, there were changes that affect black people. First black Speaker of the House, Joe Tate from Detroit, elected. Another Detroiter, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, again, making changes at this level. Structural things that wouldn't happen statewide in terms of making policy that didn't happen but for Michigan Dems. What would you say to in response to that, to someone who would say, well, wait a second, Michigan Dems seem to be really making an impact and appreciable change for black people. That's worth support.
Well, then why are people so apathetic? Making changes and selling those changes or explaining those changes are two different things. And, if you talk about, I think having the first speaker, it's wonderful. He's a strong guy. This is not personal with anybody. If you're trying to expand the tent, then why don't you bring black elected officials into the tent? Not trying to run the tent, to be in the tent. I've been in this job for 10 years. I have never had a relationship of any significance with the Michigan Democratic Party. I think that's problematic. I thought it was problematic as it related to me. And, then I talked to the black mayors and they say, we're in the same boat.
Well, this is astonishing to me. So then I would have to understand how the Michigan Democratic Party's apparatus would work, because if they're getting involved only on statewide elections, Congress, Senate, or do they normally have a hand in local elections, like with mayors and things? For example, I'm not familiar with the Michigan Democratic Party working with city council or working specifically with the mayors. Is it just because of that lack then thereof of they're working more on the congressional level?
Maybe
statewide?
Maybe so. But you want to get all of the voters out, and the way to get voters out is to connect. For example, the Michigan Democratic Party has a position that I think they call the Michigan Democratic Party Black Outreach Director.
Yes.
Okay. Never met him.
Mm.
Those other mayors have never met him. What outreach is there I'm not saying he has, sit in the office on a regular basis, but I mean, come on now, you're the state outreach director.
Right.
And elected officials don't know who you are.
Yeah. Well, let's say party chair Lavora Barnes listening right now. She's saying, Warren, he's got a point. Executive Evans, can you set forth maybe a strategy, a specifics, anything that you would say? Would it be more meetings? Would it be calling people into the Democratic Party? Would it be trying to have direct? What would it look like to have better engagement, I guess, with these local elected
all
officials?
All of the above.
Okay.
And that's all it is involvement. And again, I mean, it's not rocket science to understand that if you involve these other people, in other words, get input from them, there's a possibility that your decision making will be tweaked a little bit.
Mm.
This is not, I'm not running from the Democratic Party.
Right.
I'm trying to get Biden elected in November.
Right.
And when you talk about apathy, the message I'm trying to send is don't call me 4 weeks before the election and ask me to go get the vote out.
Yeah.
I need to be able to know what you're doing. I need input in what you're doing, and I need to be able to try to sell it.
Perfectly understood. Perfect place to end it. Wayne County Executive Warren Evans, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, we'll talk about how congregants at one Detroit church are interpreting the upcoming presidential election. That plus more is coming up next on The Metro.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Just taking a quick look at the weather forecast before we get started. Today, it's going to be very sunny with a high around 54 degrees. We see the sun peaking right now. Tomorrow, Tuesday, will be sunny as well with a high around 65 degrees. Do expect wind gusts up to 20 miles per hour. And Wednesday will be partly sunny with a high around 66 degrees. So definitely a warmer week ahead. Now, President Joe Biden won in 2020 thanks in large part to black voters. That was true in many American cities, including Detroit. NPR's Layla Fadel spoke with Reverend Kenneth Flowers of Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church about how his congregation views the presidential race.
It's a recent Sunday morning. Good morning. Good morning. And a few hundred people file into the wooden pews at Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Detroit. The choir assembles and the service begins. Reverend Kenneth Flowers appears before the congregation to give his Sunday sermon, as he's done for pretty much every Sunday for 29 years. On this day, he focuses on the power of faith.
Strong faith, strong power. Weak faith, weak power. No faith, no power. You gotta have some kind of faith to believe that the Lord will make a way.
Afterward, he greets congregants who drive from across the metro area to attend his Sunday service.
Yeah. It was a wonderful service. Yes. Okay, love y'all. Take care. Okay. I'll see y'all Wednesday.
Then he takes us up to his office to talk politics. The walls are covered in pictures of flowers with civil rights icons and U.S. presidents.
God has blessed me to go to the White House twice under Clinton, 4 times under Obama, and 1 time under President Biden.
So you didn't go during President Trump's?
No, and have no desire to go. Had no desire, and praying that he will not be reelected, because I definitely do not have no desire. If he gets reelected, we may not have a White House. We may not have a democracy.
Do you feel that way?
I strongly do.
In 2020, President Biden won the presidency thanks in large part to black voters like Flowers, especially in swing states like Michigan. This year,
He does not have the same pull. Many of the black people who I've talked to have stated that they definitely are not voting for Trump. But many have said, nah, maybe I ought to sit this one out. Biden is not doing as much. And so I've had to explain to them and show them that this election, if you sit it out, if you do not vote, then what that does is that you are giving a vote to Donald Trump. President Biden needs every black vote he can get. Now, at the same time, he nor Vice President Harris nor the administration should take our vote for granted. They have to earn it.
polls bear out what Flowers is saying. Biden's support among black voters is declining. Flowers is a Democrat, and he thinks Biden has been a great president. He points to things like the infrastructure bill and jobs. But he says for young black voters, that's just not enough.
They are very upset because they don't feel that President Biden is doing enough to get humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in Gaza. So you have, on the one hand, African-American young people who are saying, well, what about us in terms of Black Lives Matter? What about unemployment? What about issues that affect us, student loan debt? Can we get jobs, housing, things of that nature? But at the same time, you have some of those same African-Americans also saying, while we can support Israel in some aspects, you're not doing enough to stop the killing of the innocent Palestinians. And I'm pro-Israel. The Jewish people historically have been there for African Americans in terms of the founding of our institutions and supporting us in terms of freedom and justice. I have always supported the Jewish people, but I can speak out against the Israeli government and still be supportive of my Jewish brothers and sisters. I do not think that what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing is right as it relates to the Palestinian people. Hamas needs to be stopped. I get that. You have to do that. Israel has the right to exist. Israel has the right to defend herself. But the Palestinian are people also. They are people as well.
Flowers says young black voters see their own struggle in the struggle of Palestinians.
You get people here, young people saying, okay, so we can't get certain things because of the color of our skin, and they can't get things done because of the color of their skin. So what's the difference?
He breaks down how the different generations are viewing the election in his congregation.
The older people, they want to make sure that democracy continues. When I've talked to older people, they want to be able to pay for their prescriptions. They want to be able to pay their bills. They want to be able to make sure they have money for food and not have to decide between a prescription or do I eat. Young folk are saying economic also, but we want jobs and we want to be safe. A lot of young people who I've talked to like, man, I just want to live to see 25, which blew me away. I'm like, that's your goal, to live to be 25?
Because of the dangers?
The dangers, not just of police, but there's been gang violence in different areas, people dying, and a lot of people don't have a lot of hope. They're like, these jobs are not paying any money. So some way, somehow, the Biden administration not only produced jobs, and we just got the last report, they produced over 350,000 jobs, blew folk away. But the question then becomes, are these good paying jobs?
And so Flowers says Biden and his surrogates have a lot of work to do.
Everybody's looking now saying, if the election was held today, Biden would lose Michigan. The good news is the election is not being held today. It's going to be held in November. So you still have March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. You still got 8 months. In a political cycle, 8 months is a long time.
He links it back to the message of his sermon.
Give people hope and help them develop faith again.
That was NPR's Layla Fadel speaking with Detroit Reverend Kenneth Flowers right here on the Metro.
It is the Metro on 1019 WDET. Of course, daylight savings just happened, and a Republican state senator from West Michigan has introduced a bill to let voters decide this fall whether to continue daylight savings time or end it. The bill was referred to a committee that rarely meets, so it's possible it won't see the light of day. But what you will be seeing is more of the Metro when we return. We'll talk to a leader of a housing nonprofit about how they are dealing with a scandal that hit one of their employees when we return on the Metro. It's the Metro on 1019 WDET. I am Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Thanks for joining us on the Metro this morning. Once again, taking a quick look at the weather forecast, just so you all know, today's going to be sunny with a high around 54 degrees. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the sun continues on with a high of 65, maybe a little windy, but still really nice weather. And Wednesday will be partly sunny with a high around 65 degrees as well. So it looks like we're going to have nice warm weather this week in Michigan. Now, Nick.
Yes. Looking forward to not only wonderful weather, looking forward to continuing here on the Metro. And next up, we get into a story that deals with the United Community Housing Coalition, which for decades now has been working to keep low-income Detroiters in their homes. The nonprofit has helped prevent foreclosures and has helped people find housing. It's also been a big advocate for eviction legal defense work in the court. But recently, the organization has been navigating tricky waters. That's because the director of a home ownership program was accused of orchestrating a fraud scheme that stole homes from dozens of Detroiters. The woman, Zena Thomas, was arrested and charged in a criminal complaint by the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. And to discuss what has happened here with the organization and how they're trying to move forward, we have Ted Phillips here. He is the executive director of the United Community Housing Coalition. Ted, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. Well, good to be here.
Good to have you here. And just as a heads up, the Metro also invited Assistant United States Attorney Dawn Eisen onto the show, but she declined our request because the case against Zena Thomas is still ongoing. But pivoting back to you, Ted, before we get into that alleged fraud that happened with someone in your organization, can you tell us just a little bit about what the United Community Housing Coalition does and why you believe it's important for Detroit residents?
Well, we've been in business. This is our 50th year. We were hoping to celebrate that this year. But at any rate, we've been providing landlord-tenant lawyers to do eviction defense work. We're the lead agency in the 36th District Court on that issue. Detroit's like nowhere else in the country in terms of evictions, even with the decline recently to 21,000 cases being filed last year. We're still higher than any place else in the nation. We've also been involved in tax foreclosure prevention since 2003, when the new law went into effect to try to save persons, particularly in Detroit, from losing their homes to tax foreclosure. We also do housing placement work to work with persons that are households that are low income and facing an eviction with no place else to go, and we find housing for them. We've engaged in tenant organizing work to work with groups of tenants with common problems in various areas of the city, subsidized housing or displacement due to gentrification, various other kinds of things like that. And we have a repair program as well to work with those in homes that we had recently purchased. Generally, our purchasing program is to work with persons in homes that are in tax foreclosure or in some sort of land contract problem with their seller and to work them out of that so that they can own their homes free and clear.
Yeah. And I mean, you're one of the handful of organizations that we have that can work to help residents navigate tax foreclosures. Been doing it since 2010, we know. But of course, that also puts you in situations with folks who are in difficult spots that can also be taken advantage of. And that's one of the things at issue here with the alleged claim against Zena Thomas, conspiring with others to steal over 30 properties across Wayne County, primarily in Detroit, and utilizing the access and trust that she had while as an employee of UCHC. What do you make of the alleged claim against Zena Thomas? I'm going to give you a opportunity to respond.
Well, we first became aware of it on January 4th when the FBI called me. We discussed what they had. It seemed pretty overwhelming. I should note that it appears so far, that the persons that she preyed upon were not clients of UCHC. We're still digging on that to try to make sure that's so, but also to, whether they were or not, to try to see what ways we can do to help minimize the harm. But it did appear that we were told that she and one other staff actually were under investigation, and a couple of other people and we now understand a couple of other people as well. But it was some sort of a scheme to find individuals. We're not quite sure how they did, but to have deeds forged and notarized to another party. And then the tail end of that would be then evicting that person or someone else evicting the rightful homeowner. The first case that we became aware of was when we met with the FBI. I think it was January 4th. And it was a case that our legal team had picked up in court, which was natural because we're there. And, of course, we could not represent because of the conflict. So we found other attorneys for that individual. And we will do the same with anyone else that we encounter, and we want to make sure we're keeping a keen eye out for anyone who might be affected by this.
I know that to date there hasn't been an allegation against UCHC, and that you say currently this posture confirms the integrity of your programs. But there might be some people who think the culture within your organization may have allowed this to occur. Is that not true? What would you respond to someone who would say that but for the culture, we might not even have had this happen?
So far, the FBI has indicated that they found nothing that would implicate the organization. I think the culture is one of people busting their butts to try to help people. We are very appalled by this individual, and if there is another one that is charged as well as that, we've suspended both of them without pay. We are going to be engaging in reviews of our programs, and if there's things we can find there to change, we certainly will. We're open to that. I've said that from the very beginning. I think in general, and I would say that to a person, the staff is just appalled by this, and everyone has been pitching. And I think the culture is one of being very mission-oriented, doing above and beyond the call for the clients we serve. I can understand skepticism when something like this hits, but I think the culture is one of that, and this is an aberration.
All right. Well, if it's an aberration, one way to figure that out would be an audit. You've already mentioned that you're looking at your internal processes, but Council Member Mary Waters called for immediate pause of contracts with your organization and an audit. Are you working with her and others in order to keep contracts coming to your organization, or do you think that in order to engage in a full audit, you should pause activities? What response would you have to someone who'd say, hey, we should put a pause on this and make sure everything's safe before we start sending more city money and contracts to UCHC?
We have been meeting. I presented to council at the last council session on last Tuesday. My understanding was that I did not see a final resolution from Council Member Waters. I understood that what you're citing had been pulled, but perhaps I'm wrong. There was another resolution from Council President Mary Sheffield, which does call for a review, and I've said repeatedly we are very open to that, and the administration has met with us as well. And we do expect that there will be a review, an outside review, and we'll be doing our own internal review as well. I think to pause our funding would be catastrophic. We're looking at March 31st being the last day for persons being able to save their home who are in tax foreclosure in Wayne County, and I have to treat that as, I know that's been extended a few times in the past, but we're not where we were in the last few years with COVID. So I have to believe that that is a real date, and for us to suspend our operations, not be able to pay staff would be an absolute disaster. In addition to that, we are looking at trying to expand our reach in the eviction court. And again, we are the lead agency on that. There's 3 other agencies that work through us. So this would impact all of that. And I think that the only thing worse than the horrible circumstances that we find ourselves in right now would be if we punish others for it as well by not being able to continue our services.
Yeah. You mentioned 2 people suspended currently. Do you believe that any more suspensions may be coming up before I let you go? Is there anybody else under question, or do you think you got it?
There was no one else under question by the FBI, but certainly if we find internally that there's some others that were involved, and I've said this to the FBI, we will pass on any information that we find that you may not have.
All right. Ted Phillips, Executive Director of the United Community Housing Coalition, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Coming up, we'll talk about how 2 Michigan State Board trustees are facing possible removal. But first, let's take a quick look at news. Let's take a look at sports. In men's college basketball, Michigan State lost to Indiana 65-64. Womp womp. Michigan lost to Nebraska 85-70. Oakland plays Cleveland State in the Horizon League semifinals. That's tonight at the Indiana Farmers Coliseum. So it is March. Madness will begin, and I don't know how my Spartans are looking.
Yeah, you would talk about the Michigan State Spartans taking an L before we get into the next
To the next conversation, right? So here we go. 2 Michigan State University's school board trustees are facing removal over misconduct allegations. As part of the weekly series Mishmash, WDET's Shana Roth and Zach Gorchow from Gongward News Service unpack the allegations as well as the vote to remove 2 of the board's trustees.
This is just the latest chapter in years and years of acrimony at the Michigan State University Board of Trustees. Last fall, one member of the board, Brianna Scott, a Democrat from Muskegon, asked the board to ask a law firm to investigate various allegations of misconduct, and by misconduct, violating board policies, exceeding board authority, by other members of the Board of Trustees. 2 people specifically that are in the crossfire now are Rima Vassar and Dennis Deno. It's a very long report, I believe 66 pages. Most of it documents alleged conduct by Rima Vassar. And as you read this report, it basically points the finger at the 2 of them for conspiring to undermine the now former interim president of Michigan State, Teresa Woodruff.
And all of this culminated in the board voting late Sunday night to ask the governor to review Deno and Vassar for possible removal.
I also understand that the board believes that I, along with Trustee Deno and Trustee Scott, should be censured based on the findings of the Miller-Chevalier report. I'm gratified that Miller-Chevalier's investigation concluded that the most serious allegations against me were groundless and that there was no finding of personal benefit, undue influence, or harm to the university. Again, while I am fully human and I make mistakes, I lead with integrity, transparency, and with transformative change at the center of my decisions. The Miller-Chevalier report does not change that immutable fact. You invited me to the dance, and you told me you hate my outfit, my music, and my style. You told me to shut up, smile, and feel lucky you got invited at all. Never dare to suggest we don't really want change. That's a quote from a colleague at Eastern Michigan University, Teresa Green.
So under the state constitution, Whitmer has authority to remove officers for gross neglect of duty or for corrupt conduct in office or for any other misfeasance or malfeasance therein, end quote. But this is a very tricky area for Whitmer to weigh in on. I mean, it's highly political. Both of the trustees at issue are Democrats. But let's say she does remove them. How do you think that would hurt Whitmer or Democrats in general?
Well, it would be a really ugly situation. Both Rima Vassar, who's the first Black woman to be president of the MSU Board of Trustees until her resignation on Sunday, and Dennis Deno, who's Arab American, have said targeting them is almost tantamount to targeting the communities that they come from. And so right there, you can see that is going to be very tumultuous for Michigan Democrats because African Americans, Arab Americans are huge pillars of their coalition.
That was WDET Shana Roth speaking with Gonwer's Zach Gorchow. You can hear more of Shana Roth and Zach's conversation on the Mishmash podcast.
This is The Metro on 101.9 WDET. Tia Graham alongside me, Nick Austin. President Joe Biden is issuing a budget plan today for 2025. While it's unlikely to pass the House and Senate, it sets Biden's goals for another term as president. The plan outlines tax breaks for families, high taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations, and lower health care costs. The budget plan projects that if implemented, the country's deficit would shrink by $3 trillion over a decade. Coming up, we're going to continue on the Metro with a conversation looking at a new film that highlights the story of the Bad River Band and how they have been working to stop Enbridge's Line 5 when we return on the Metro. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I am Nick Austin here in studio with my good friend and our co-host, Getting It Done, Tia Graham, getting it done for you as well with some of the news that you need to know. And you specifically need to know this today as Detroit's Reparations Task Force is hosting 3 town halls this week. Residents can come and share their stories for the Black Audit Project, which measures the well-being of Afro-descendant people. The first session is tonight at historic King Solomon Church on 14th Street. So that's happening tonight. Opportunity to get out there and make your voice heard. A theme that's been coming up a little bit here today. So we work to engage everybody here in Detroit and throughout Southeast Michigan on the things that are important to all of us. Something important to you, artsy folks out there, of course, is the Oscars. And Oppenheimer won 7 Oscars at the ceremony last night, including Best Picture. Christopher Nolan won for director as well, and the Best Actor award went to Cillian Murphy. The Best Actor in a Supporting Role went to Robert Downey Jr. for their work on the film as well. Emma Stone won the Oscar for Best Actress in the film Poor Things, and Divine Joy Randolph won Best Supporting Actress for her performance in The Holdovers.
Nick, personally, I did watch part of the Oscars last night, and I think I just tuned in for Ryan Gosling singing the Ken song from Barbie, which was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Billie Eilish did win for Best Song, so this is her second Oscar for writing a song for a film. So I think that's pretty huge for her young age. She's like under 25. She has 2 Oscars for songs. One's from, I believe it is 007. There you go. Not 007, but you know who that guy is.
James Bond.
There you go.
I mean, he is 007. So that is his official call sign. So I think that's an accurate response.
Okay, cool. And then she won again this year. And I honestly don't know what film she won for, but I know she won another Oscar. So that was pretty cool.
All these films, whatever. The Oscar is the same Oscar for all of them.
You're talking to a person who loves film. So it was great to watch that. But, speaking of films, speaking of documentaries, and just speaking of telling stories through film, since 1953, Line 5 has been in operation in the Straits of Mackinac. And according to Enbridge's website, it hasn't had an incident in 65 years, but there are those who believe otherwise. there have been protests against Enbridge's Line 5. The oil pipeline runs through the Bad River Band's land in northern Wisconsin and the Straits of Mackinac in Michigan. The indigenous group has been fighting the pipeline's existence for a long time now. More recently, in December of last year, Michigan's Public Service Commission issued an order approving Enbridge's application to replace Line 5 where it currently lies. The new documentary film titled Bad River follows the Bad River Band, a small Native community in northern Wisconsin, waging a battle to prevent the line from existing. Joining the show is Bad River's filmmaker, Mary Mazzio. Thank you so much for joining us on The Metro as well. Just a heads up, The Metro reached out to Enbridge for comment, and they plan to give their perspective on Line 5 on our show after the movie has been released. So once again, Mary, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Tia, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're jumping into things. On December 1st of last year, the Michigan Public Service Commission, they did approve Enbridge's project known as the Straits Line 5 Replacement Segment Project. What are your thoughts on this, especially after going through everything you did with the film?
I appreciate that. So things are moving very, very quickly, as you just alluded to, not just in Michigan, but also in Wisconsin. And so, Line 5 has been, of course, a source of great controversy in Michigan and now also in northern Wisconsin with the Bad River Band. Here's what I like as a general comment. What's happening in Michigan is slightly different than what's happening in Wisconsin, but both involve the very same line, which is now over 70 years old. And in Michigan, as you know, there has been denting with anchor hooking. But as it relates to Line 5 in northern Wisconsin, the line right now, as found by the lower court in the case that the Bad River Band filed, is now at imminent risk of rupture. And a rupture could happen as soon as the next flood, which puts Lake Superior in the balance.
So, why historically is it important to highlight and tell stories like Bad River?
Thank you for that question. The story actually took a turn during filming. And originally I was really laser focused on this David and Goliath story of this small band taking on an energy giant, if you will, over a pipeline that traverses 12 miles of the Bad River Reservation, 3 miles of which the rights to operate expired 10 years ago. However, during the course of filming, tribal elders wanted to not only talk about the challenges with Enbridge, but how they approached the open pit mining project 5 years earlier. And then before that, how they fought for treaty rights. And before that, how they dealt with St. Mary's on the reservation. And so the story became really a historical retrospective, and one that is infused with defiance and resilience and resistance. And as one member told me last week, he said, win, lose, or draw, we're going to show up for the fight. We might bear the bruises, but it's all about standing up for what we believe in.
And Mary, right ahead, please.
I was going to say, former chairman Mike Wiggins has said something really interesting. And in the film, he said, look, we're fighting with sort of extraordinary effort to protect Lake Superior, not just for ourselves, but for the country. This is the freshwater stronghold of America. And what he went on to say, what we're doing is our patriotic duty for this country.
All right, Mary. So, just continuing on, just listening to some of the things that you were saying about Bad River and the people that you were able to discuss everything with, the controversy, just the long history there. What were some things that you learned from the people, just building on what you just said, from the people surrounding that area?
Honestly, Tia, I learned so much. Yeah. Number one, here is a group that's been historically neglected, economically challenged. They have turned down millions and millions of dollars. The most recent offer was $80 million. And they've turned it down to protect a resource, really a precious resource that all Americans are going to need to draw on. And they're doing this not for themselves, but for all of us. And, I'm more like a typical American, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. And I will conquer and go forth, young man and young woman. right? And so to me, what an extraordinary gesture of loyalty, of thinking greater than self. And that has really struck me through all of this. Yeah. And the other thing that struck me and what I learned is really what the elders spoke to. And that is, you have this view of American history, and then you have the real view of American history and the telling of these stories, which obviously are difficult, but with such pride. And it really struck me how extraordinary this history, which really has had very little light, is today. And it informs the current battle, of course, with the energy giant. You mentioned at the top of the show that you're going to be interviewing Enbridge when the movie comes out. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I'm very grateful that Enbridge is in the film. Mm-hmm. Mike Fernandez, their chief communications officer, agreed to an interview. He showed up. He was prepared. He was respectful. Now, he articulates a viewpoint that ultimately dials down into what is good for Enbridge, right? And the profitability, of course, of this line is immense. And yet here you have this small band that is not thinking about Enbridge's bottom line. They are instead thinking about this precious resource for North America.
So, hey, Mary, I'm going to break in really quickly because we're running up on time, but I have two more questions for you. Number one, you talked about it a little bit earlier. Why is it patriotic that the Band River or that the indigenous group there is working and fighting like they are right now?
So this was a comment that former Chairman Mike Wiggins, right, said, this is our patriotic duty. The reason he said that is because with increasing climate, right, with increasing weather, Lake Superior is the largest freshwater source in the world by area. And if it gets polluted, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah, and last thing, Mary, before I let you go, to give us this quick little rundown on the film, is 30 seconds if you can, and where people can see it this week.
Yeah, so we're opening in 10 different cities. We're in Detroit, of course, among, LA, Boston, New York, Wisconsin, and more. We'd love your listeners to check out badriverfilm.com. We've got an amazing trailer, and it's a story that I think is so resonant on so many different levels.
Mary Mazzio is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker and the director of Bad River. The Michigan premiere of this film is this Friday, March 15th at select AMC theaters. The film is an hour and 38 minutes long. Mary, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Tia, thank you so much. I love that you gave me an Academy Award. Not quite yet there, but I'll take it.
Oh, no. Okay, so we're speaking it into existence, Mary. It's in there. It's out there. Manifestation.
Oh, I love it, Tia. You're the best. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, Mary. Thank you.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. According to our co-host Tia Graham, also Academy Award winning.
I was going to say, I'm just manifesting things for people. So, Nick, you're an award winner.
You get an award. You get an award.
We legit do have an award winner, though. An award-winning journalist coming up talking to us right now. He's the host of In the Groove. Hello, award winner.
Thank you. Yes, I'm currently taking a shot out of my Grammy in here. It's an honor to be here. The only award that really matters is the title of C-List Regional Micro-Influencer. And that's what I'm going to be for you today as we get in the groove. The big thing is that I have tickets to give away to see the legendary French electronic pop duo Air. They're going to be in town playing their record Moon Safari at the Fox Theater in October. This is a very buzzy, need-to-go show. So I'm just looking at the phones right now. When we give away those tickets, I think the phones will probably explode. And most likely, the way things are here, I'll have to clean it up. That's coming up here on In the Groove, 12 to 3 on WDET.
I was going to say, he's not kidding, probably.
You should not put C4 in a phone. It doesn't need to be there. Makes no sense. Unless this was an episode of the A-Team.
Oh, don't get me started. That's the Metro for March 11th, 2024. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt. Our technical director is Nate Bender. Music by Sam Bobian. Our director of news is Jerome Vaughn, and our program director is Adam Fox.
The Metro is a WDET production, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. And if you like what you hear and you want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at wdet.org/donate.
This is 1019 WDET FM Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.